So I get this email from my friend Heather K. And it's talking about this democracy countdown. And I want to read it to you just here quickly. It says, how long do we have? About the time our original 13 states adopted their new constitution in 1787, Alexander Tyler, a Scottish history professor at the University of Edinburgh, had this to say about the fall of the Athenian Republic some 2,000 years earlier. A democracy is always temporary in nature. It simply cannot exist as a permanent form of government. A democracy will continue to exist up until the time that the voters discover they can vote themselves generous gifts from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always vote for the candidates who promise the most benefits from the public treasury, with the result that every democracy will finally collapse due to loose fiscal policy, which is always followed by a dictatorship. He continues, the average age of the world's greatest civilizations from the beginning of history has been about 200 years. During those 200 years, those nations always progressed through the following sequence. From bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, from abundance to complacency, from complacency to apathy, from apathy to dependence, and from dependence back into bondage. This is absolutely right. Karl Marx said, the road to socialism is democracy. Karl Marx, the father of communism, said the road to socialism is democracy. Why would he say that? I mean, democracy is freedom. You know, democracy is liberty. Why would the father of modern socialism in the 20th century, why would he say democracy is the road to socialism? See, because they thought of socialism as a positive thing. It would make ultimate freedom for everybody. Everybody would be equal. You would no longer have oppressors and subjects. Everybody would be just one equal mass of humanity. But the reason, well, and you find it in the people that have followed Marx's philosophy, from Lenin on down the line. Down to Castro and everybody else. It's always been democracy that they promote so heavily. You know, the Bolshevik Revolution we all know about is what brought socialism to Russia. And the Bolsheviks came from Lenin's designation. His party was called the Social Democrats. And in their meetings, they came into disagreements, as socialists always do. They had some relatively minor disagreements. Excuse me. And Lenin named his party the Bolsheviks, which meant the majority, and named the opposing branch of the party the Mensheviks, which meant the minority. And so he would always call himself the majority, the Bolsheviks. Well, he was the majority of the Social Democrat Party. And so these guys realized that democracy was the only thing that gave socialism a foothold at all. Because people start taking advantage of the public treasury, like this thing says. What they failed to calculate was the speed at which democracy would lead to socialism. You know, they found out that when people were free to vote for themselves, they were not quick to abdicate their civil rights. They weren't quick to turn over their individual rights to the state. And so you had people seeking their own best interest, which, of course, never came to a uniformity. And so what quickly became necessary is for one person to dictate to the rest what the terms of this great socialism experiment would be. And so socialism always leads to dictatorship, because when you have the state making choices for the citizenry, there can ultimately only be one person's vision for what those choices will be. And so all dissent, all other opinion, all freedom of expression will, of course, have to be stamped out. And you see that in every socialist country on the face of the earth, from Venezuela to communist China, North Korea and Cuba. But what they were right about is that socialism doesn't even stand a chance unless it's promoted under the guise of democracy. And through complacency and apathy and then into dependence, socialism can slowly creep back in to existence. That's why it's so imperative that we protect our country as a free republic that values individual liberties. And we don't cast ourselves in the role of democracy, where anytime 51% of the population can get together and vote something, then that makes it good, that makes it okay, because it's the will of the people. Our republic was based on protecting minorities, the minority of opinion, the minority of actions, the minority of races. And if we fail to protect those notions and we give into this notion of democracy, that anytime 51% of the population get together and agree on something, we will follow this exact path. And we have come through all these different steps, from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, from abundance to complacency. And now we're coming into this sequence. And are we going to stop and revert back to the liberty and the abundance and the courage and the liberty and the spiritual faith, or are we going to continue from abundance to complacency, from complacency to apathy, from apathy to dependence, and from dependence back into bondage? I think it's our choice, and protecting the free republic and not giving in to this notion of a pure democracy is the only chance we stand of reversing this course of events that was predicted at the same time our democracy, or our country rather, was being established.